Alrighty, hello everybody, and welcome to the introduction to Maya. So I'm going to kind of go over the interface as well as do a little bit of the box modeling. So it's just going to combine those first two videos I did for Max into one video for Maya. So we can go ahead and get started here. So when we're looking at Maya, it's a little bit different than Max, but the shortcut keys are all the same, which is pretty nice. But let's look at some of the main differences. So when we want to put down polygons, we actually have this thing called the polygon or poly modeling tool set, and it's all of these guys right here. So we actually just click on what we want to put down. So I'll put down a sphere, and you can see it just drops it right in the middle of the scene. And if I hit W, it switches to my move tool, and then I can move it wherever I want to. Grabbing those boxes allows me to move it on two axes at once. And, that's kind of it for the move tool. It's pretty simple. You usually do not want to try to grab it in the middle and move it, just because we're using a two-dimensional input device, which is our mouse, in a three-dimensional space. So it doesn't really translate well to movement. So that's why you usually want to use the arrows or those boxes to move it in one direction. Now, when I hit E, E is going to switch to my rotate tool. And you can see that I'm then rotating the object. Pretty simple. Control Z, of course, is your undo. And that will undo quite a few steps if you need to. And then if I hit R, R switches to my scale tool. And you can see that I can then scale on all three axes by grabbing the middle box. Or I can grab these individual boxes and scale it however I want to. Like that. Right? So pretty interesting. And then of course I can hit delete. So then again, let's say I want a box. I just click the cube and there it comes down. It's right there for me to work with and mess around with and do all of that good stuff. So let's look over here on the right side. On the right side we have the P-cube menu. So this is kind of the menu that controls everything about our object. So if I hit P-cube 1, what that's going to do is it's going to tell us what its translate is, what its rotate is, what its scale is, all of that stuff. So if I start moving it around, we can see that this is now the value. So I can just click that, hit 0, and it'll reset for me. And so these are pretty much all the things that make up the polycube. And this one right here, polycube 1, so it's the third tab. That one's going to allow us to actually change individual values about it. So if we wanted it to come in at 10, 10, and 10, we would just enter that there, and now it's a 10 by 10 by 10. And of course you can use the scales as well, but usually you'll just be typing if you're putting in some specific values here. So now we're back to 1. And of course if I go over here to P-cube, we can see that I'm translated, so I can hit 0 and 0, and that's going to reset it to the middle for me. Now let's look at polycube 1 here, and we have subdivisions width, height, and depth. So this is going to control how many faces are actually on this polygon object that we have to then manipulate for box modeling. So let's, for instance, change subdivisions width to 2. Oh, I typed 12. So 2. So you can see that it now split it down the middle. So that we have two faces all the way around on each side. So the reason you do that is so you can actually start manipulating your object a little bit better to make, so in this case we're going to make a table. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and go subdivisions height I don't need to change. So if I do that, it's going to put a 2 all the way around there. So now I have 4 on these two sides because of the one we have on width. But I don't need to change height, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to 1 on height. And then subdivisions depth, I'm going to go ahead and make that 2. And that way we have 4 faces up here so that we can very easily make a table. Okay? But let's look at how the camera works in Maya before we do that. So Maya works on a left mouse button controls. So if I hold down Alt and left mouse button, I can rotate around an object. And if I hold Alt right mouse button, you can see that I scale in and out of that object. And that's pretty much the main ones you need. If you need to focus on something, you just select it and hit F. And that will frame it as it is, or just kind of center it in the middle of your screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a table. So that's the very, very general basics of Maya for what we need to do just this basic box modeling exercise. So we're not going to mess with any of these other menus quite yet. We are going to get into the animation one a little bit later, but for right now we're just going to stick in polygon modeling, and we'll be doing some what's called extruding and stuff like that. So let me go ahead and scale this down to make like the table. And I'll do that. There we go. Okay. Now I need to work on what's called a component of this object. So I'm going to start messing with this, but I'm just going to hit Control Z all the time to undo kind of what I'm changing. I'm just going to show you what each component is. So if I right click and hold, it allows me to switch to the different components of a model. So if I click on vertex, for instance, vertices are those points that two lines connect. So if I click on that vertex and hit W, I can move it up and down. And obviously moving it like this is making an impossible shape, right? Because this is a triangle and can't do this shape. Or this is a square, but it can't bend this polygon right here in the middle. That's not going to work. So you can see it's giving me these kind of like black edges. That's just kind of showing we made an impossible shape here. So usually what you want to do is if you're going to work with vertices, you'll hold Shift so you can select two vertices at once. And then you can move them up and down. And that's only going to work right here, obviously, because now we have impossible polygons over here. So I could just hold Shift and grab all three of those and then move them. Right? And then that makes it a very, very, very easy manipulation of that object. So I just hit Control Z to go back. One thing about vertices is you can't scale them, right? So if you just have one vertex selected, you can't scale it. However, if I have two vertices selected, then I can scale them together. But only in 2 dimensions, right? Like I can't scale it that way, and I can't scale it that way. I can pretty much only scale them in relation to each other to get them closer or further apart. So let's look at the next component. So if I right click, there's edge. So if I select edge, it's just going to grab pretty much the edge, right? So that's pretty simple. Just grabs that whole piece so you can then move up and down. That you can not rotate, right? And also you can only scale in relation to its in vertices, right? So these two vertices here is what it scales into. Okay. And the most important one that we're going to be using is called face. So if I select face, you can see that it actually selects that whole entire polygon, and I can move it up and down, or the face is what it's referred to, right? So that's how we're going to do manipulation. That's how we're actually going to box model. So I'm going to hold Shift and select all 4 of these, and then I'm going to come over here to my Edit Mesh Tools, and I can see something called Extrude, right? So if I hit Extrude, what's going to happen is it's going to pull all of them out, and they all scale together, right? Which is not necessarily what I want. So I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm going to come over here where it says Keep Faces Together. I'm going to click this so it's off, and then watch this. I'm going to go ahead and scale these faces down. Right, so now they're scaled individually, and they're just sitting on top of these polygons. So that's perfect. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the W key, which is going to get off of my extrude key and allow me to then move these. So I'm going to slide these over here. I'm going to slide these over here. You don't want to go off, right? If you do that, it does that. You just kind of want to go close to the edge. It doesn't have to be exact, just close. And then I'll move these guys to that edge, and these guys to that edge. There we go. So now I'll hold Shift and select all 4 of those again. And I will just simply go to Edit Mesh, Extrude, and pull those up. And then I can go ahead and add some flare by selecting the Scale tool at the end of that arrow, and it switches to the Scale mode instead of the Move mode. And then if I click on an arrow, of course, it goes back to the Move mode. So there we go. Then I'm going to right click, go back to Object mode, hit W, so I'm back on my Move tool, move it up, and then let's go ahead and hit E for rotate, and I can just rotate that around, right? And if I'm not at exactly the value I need to be, of course, we can come over here. And we see our rotate is 180, almost, I almost got it perfect. So I'll just type 180 right there. And there we go. So that is our table. Pretty simple, nothing too crazy. And so this should get you pretty much caught up on those first 2 Max videos, all in one nice video for you. Again, remember, we're just going to be working on the polygon modeling tools. And don't be too scared of anything else. We're going to get to it as we get to it. One real quick thing, over here on the left side, it shows you what's in your scene. So I'm going to put down a couple of models here. So you can see over here in my object list, they actually are listed now. So I can just hit P cube 1, P cylinder, or P plane. And of course we can rename these over here, whatever you want to, so like 4. And then it'll be named right there for you, which is much simpler. I'll just go ahead and whoop. There we go. So now I've got a gray floor for a gray table for a gray cylinder. All right, so that's it.